Hi everybody, my name is Jessie and I'm going to tell in more detail the story of the birth of my first child, our daughter. I have told this video or this story somewhat in a past video. I think it was titled Our Baby Was Born or something like that. But I just wanted to tell it in a little bit more detail, partially for myself. I just would like to have this video for myself to look back on, or any friends and family if they're ever super curious for like the full details. But also I'm kind of, oh yeah, if by the time this video is out, you probably know that I'm pregnant with our second child, which is exciting. But I'm thinking a lot about what the next birth and all of that will be like. And I'm honestly scared because I had a difficult, I was saying I'm honestly scared because I had a very difficult first labor and delivery of our daughter. So I'm really kind of trying to process how I feel about the first birth and really put it out there, say it. I think the saying of it and all of that will help. And yeah, I'm thinking about my next birth and how I want that to look, and I'll talk about that a little bit at the end. So this is going to be a long video, and just wanting you all to know to watch this with discretion, because I'm not saying that my birth was like super traumatic or like horrendous, but for me it was really difficult. And if you are pregnant right now, or maybe very soon trying to get pregnant, like, you might not want to watch this. You might. It depends on your personality. If you think it's going to scare you and make you feel worse, maybe not. Personally, I pretty much only listened to positive birth stories when I was pregnant. And I just truly didn't think that I would have such a difficult birth experience. So if I had it to do over, I wish that I had watched more difficult birth stories like a couple years before getting pregnant, so that they were like, I was aware of like what could happen, but I wasn't maybe watching it like while I was pregnant, because, wouldn't want to get scared so early, so close to giving birth. That's just what I think I would want for myself if I had it to do over. But anyway, I just wanted to give that warning because I don't want to freak anybody out, especially soon to be moms. But yeah, and I chose to use the word in the title difficult because the birth did feel traumatic for me, but I decided to not use that word because honestly, like, it could have been so much worse. And even though it felt traumatic for me, we didn't have any problems with our baby. She was totally healthy. I was relatively unscathed physically, not emotionally. And I also felt really supported by all of the staff that we had. So, I just feel like there was a lot of things that made it could have been way worse, is all I'm saying. And I guess I'm just trying to recognize that it can get really, really, like, there's some really traumatic things that can happen in labor and delivery. So anyway, okay, so my birth plan was to do a home birth, and we lived like literally at the time like 7 minutes from the main hospital in our area. So I wasn't concerned about doing a home birth because I knew if anything went wrong, we could hop in the car or even get an ambulance or whatever, be at the hospital really fast. So that factored into me feeling like pretty good and pretty safe about trying to do a home birth. So we chose a midwife. She's wonderful. Really only good things to say about her. We also chose a doula, which I'm not sure if I'm going to do a doula for the second baby, but for the first baby, I kind of was like, it'd be nice to have the support, and it wound up, being really helpful. So I'm glad that we did that. And yeah, my birth plan was to do a home birth. And, you know, as you may or may not know, for home birth, it's just, you know, you don't have, basically the main difference is you're at home and you don't have like pain management I mean, you know, you can use things like a tub, but besides that, there's no pain management options. There's not even like laughing gas or anything. So I was well aware of that, and I really truly believed that, you know, that would be okay for me. Like, I was well aware that labor and delivery can often be very intense and painful and not easy, and so I was very prepared for that mentally. And yeah, just believed that it would be tough, but I would be able to do it. I truly did not think that we would wind up transferring to the hospital, which we did. But I just didn't think it would happen. I don't know if it's because I was so scared of that subconsciously I was kind of pushing away that reality. I just genuinely didn't think it would happen. I think I genuinely thought my labor might be long, it might be challenging, but I'll make it through. And I really didn't consider a whole lot of other options outside of that, which I wish I had. So I'll tell you that, like, you know, I wish I had thought through how things could go sideways a little bit more. My midwife certainly prompted me to, but I guess I just didn't take her too seriously. So yeah, anyway, I literally like didn't even pack I like hardly packed a hospital bag. It was like so not serious because I so did not think I was gonna need it. Oops. Anyway, so I wound up going into labor 4 days after my due date, so a little bit late. I didn't wind up having my daughter till just to say it now, I had a 53-hour labor, so I didn't wind up having her until over 2 days later going into labor. But yeah, I went into labor 4 days after my due date. I had a little bit of like, I think they would call it like prodromal labor a day or two before that, where I'd had some contractions and stuff for several hours, but then they stopped. So anyway, 4 days after my due date, it was like 3 a.m. in the morning, and I woke up because I was having contractions, and they were mild, but still painful. They were like period cramps, and at that point they were happening like super, not super close together, like literally like 15-20 minutes apart. So I was kind of able to sleep a little bit more the rest of the night. But anyway, my water did not break at any point, like until later in the hospital when they actually broke it. So I didn't have any signs like that. Like my water didn't break, I didn't lose my mucus plug or anything like that. I just started with mild contractions, 3 a.m. in the morning, slept a little bit, and got up in the morning, and basically the contractions just very gradually kept increasing. So yeah, by the morning time, I was like still doing things around the house, kind of trying to just do things normally, but you know, the contractions were starting to get a little bit more painful. And funniest thing is our realtor came by that day around like noon to drop off the keys for our new home, which we had literally just closed on. So everything was just like happening all at once. I remember seeing her and she gave us the keys, and I happened to have a contraction while she was there. And by that point, the contractions were strong enough that like I couldn't hide them from her, which I wasn't like trying to, because she had like told me about her birth of her child and stuff like that. But anyway, yeah, I like couldn't hide them at all. I was already at that point. I was like kind of doubling over in moderate pain when I would have a contraction. So yeah, that was at like 12 p.m. the next day. So already a lot of time had passed. My husband was using a contraction timer to kind of time where I was at, and it was just like really slow going. And I don't know. I feel like I had a sense that my labor was not going to be fast, but I certainly did not think it was going to be 53 hours either. I think I was assuming it'd be more like 24 hours or something like that. So yeah, already hours and hours had gone by. The contractions were manageable, but yeah, they're not easy, like honestly. And the funny thing is like I would think I have a pretty good pain tolerance, and I really, often if I have a headache or something, I won't even take a pain med unless I really need it. Like I just, I honestly do have a good pain tolerance. But it's just funny how birth works. Like for some women, it's just, who knows why, it's just a lot more painful and intense. And for others, maybe not so much. But I think for most women, it's not a walk in the park, at least. So anyway, the other thing that started happening, honestly, probably sometime in the afternoon, like a little after my realtor left, is I started throwing up. This was really rough. So from when I started throwing up to like whenever it ended, which is probably when I got to the hospital, I probably threw up. I didn't count, but it was probably around 15 to 20 times. So it was just that was really difficult. I think the throwing up was in response to pain, because honestly, even, though the contractions got a lot worse, they started to be really painful for me. And I think I would usually throw up, yeah, when I would get like an intense wave of pain. And it's just funny because like I'm not someone who's like prone to throwing up, so I really think it was a sign that like, yeah, it actually like was like really intense and really painful for me. Again, don't know why, but and like I said, I think it's painful. Unmedicated birth is painful for most women, but maybe for some women it's just even that much more painful, and who knows why. But it was hard. I was dealing with it well, but it was definitely hard. And when I started throwing up every hour or so, that just made it worse because my mouth started to get really raw from throwing up so much and all the stomach acid, and I couldn't keep any food or liquids down. Not that I was like hungry and trying to eat, but obviously like having the energy probably would have helped, especially knowing how long my labor was going to be, and certainly having water or liquids to keep down really would have been helpful. So that was challenging and honestly a little bit scary. So I labored alone with my husband. He was here the whole time. I forgot to mention. Just trying to support me. I labored alone, well, with him, for a long time before we called our doula. We called her at 8:30 p.m. That was probably about 15 hours into labor already. And the reason I waited so long to call her is just because even though my contractions were like painful by that point, they were still spaced quite a bit apart. So we were kind of told to like not call her like too early, otherwise she would have been with us for hours, like days, So anyway, she arrives. She was great. She just helped with things like counter pressure and like suggesting different positions to sit in and stuff like that. But yeah, the contractions have definitely gotten very painful by that point, and I just kind of remember like slogging through another night, like trying to sleep as if I could. I definitely could not sleep, but I, tried like laying in the bed. Laying down was so painful. I don't know why. That was just really hard to experience contractions laying down. And so I did a lot of like sitting on actually this swivel office chair, kind of like sitting over the back of it with like a pillow, and just I'd have a contraction and just, and also sitting on the toilet sometimes. I don't know why, but sitting and kind of like hunching over a little seemed to be the best route for me. And yeah, another thing I wrote down is that I don't know if you've been through labor, let me know if you had anything like this, but my body did this funny thing. By the time I had been in labor 12-15 hours or so, and the contractions were very painful, my body did this thing where I sort of like went into a trance between contractions is it's almost how it felt like. Just I think because the contractions were so painful and like taxing on my body, and I was like holding so much tension trying to manage the pain, and I hadn't cried for honestly until like 36 hours. I did not cry, and I'm a big crier. But I didn't cry because I was just trying to manage it all. I wasn't trying to not cry. I was just trying to manage it all, and it was so intense. So I think because it was so taxing and exhausting on my body, when I had a contraction, that afterwards it's like I was just spent, and so I would kind of just close my eyes and sit there, and there would be no thoughts in my brain, and I would kind of it's not a little bit like leave my body, leave the reality a little bit. I was also exhausted and I hadn't really slept at all. So this was almost like a pseudo sleep. I didn't fall asleep, but it was like I went straight into a meditative state. And honestly, I'm really grateful for that because I think it helped me to rest. I didn't sleep, but it was like halfway to sleep. And also, it allowed me to not think because, God, if I was thinking that whole time, I'm sure I'd be just like dreading the next contraction and being like, why is it taking so long? And what's wrong with my body? And just like all these unhelpful thoughts. So the fact that I kind of went into that weird trance-like state for the minutes between contractions was honestly helpful because, yeah, I think it just allowed me to not think about it all as much and rest up my body a little bit more. But yeah, it was definitely interesting and unexpected. Anyway, so God, that night turned into the next day, and no, just kidding. Before that, so a couple hours after my doula arrived in the evening, we had our midwife come by. She came by around like 10 p.m. And so this was like 17 hours in or something. And yeah, my contractions at that point were every 5 minutes for a whole minute each, which is, when they say things are kind of picking up more. And it was definitely intense. And, I was managing, but it was really hard to manage. So my midwife arrived. Immediately she gave me IV fluids because we told her that I'd been like throwing up constantly and couldn't keep liquids down, and my throat was raw and I was dehydrated. So that was really helpful that she could give me IV fluids. And then she checked my cervix to see how dilated it was. And at that point, which was like 17 hours in, it was 2 centimeters dilated, which in order to be able to push out a baby, it needs to get to 10 centimeters dilated. So as you can imagine, that was very discouraging to hear. And I was honestly kind of surprised, like, wow, all of that. And I am like a fifth of the way there. Like that was really hard. But I was like, okay, well, I just gotta keep moving forward. So yeah, just kept laboring. She went home, since I was like so far away from actually the pushing stage. So she went home and told me she would come back. I'm looking at my notes. Yeah, I guess we made it through that night. Like I said, my doula was there the whole time. She was helpful. We all kind of tried to sleep. I didn't really sleep, but she and my husband took turns kind of trying to get a little bit of sleep. And yeah, by like 24 hours into labor, I think I really started to feel a little more doubtful. Like, am I going to be able to do this? This is taking so long. This has been really intense and painful. I'm not even that dilated, and now I've been throwing up so much. My throat is totally raw. I was just, I was feeling doubtful and definitely concerned. So anyway, later that morning, around like 6 a.m., my midwife came back to check me. Luckily, I was 5 centimeters dilated at this point, which still is like only halfway there, but at least I was like, okay, I've gained 3 more centimeters, like something is happening. And yeah, after that, I got in the birthing tub, so that was probably around like 25, 26 hours into my labor or something. they filled up the birthing tub. I got into it. I was looking forward to that because it is warm. I like water, and it's supposed to kind of help with pain management. I mean, not really, but like it's like a comfort measure, basically. It was nice, although it was kind of like hard edges, so there was like nothing really to like. It was a little awkward. Like I honestly sat with my arms around it like this and just was like, like I was doing that thing like so hardcore in the tub where I would have a really intense, painful contraction, and then I would literally just like sit there in a trance for 5 minutes, 7 minutes, or whatever. So the other funny thing about the tub is that I honestly think it slowed my contractions down because it did kind of chill me out a little more. I was able to, I don't want to say relax, but I guess comparatively I was able to relax a little bit more and just like sit there and not move. I had this overwhelming urge to be as still as possible because the more I moved, the more it would bring on contractions. And that was kind of like, that was a challenge because I knew, and my midwife and doula knew, that the more you have contractions and the more you kind of like bring them on through movement or whatever, the labor goes faster, which is like, I wanted that, but it was so intense, and I was already over 24 hours in. I was so tired. The contractions were so painful that it's like I was trying to push them away because it was so intense. It's just the stamina that it takes to get through that, at least for how my labor felt in my body, was like very, very, very difficult. So yeah, a few hours later, I think maybe after I had gotten out of the tub, my midwife checked me again, and I was 7 centimeters dilated. So I think at this point I was like, okay, we're getting somewhere, thank goodness. And she had told me too that you can very quickly, 7 centimeters is considered active labor, and once you're there, she said you can very quickly go from like 8 to 9 to 10, often in a matter not even an hour or two, So she kind of was like, it could happen pretty fast at this point. And I was like, oh, thank God, because like, Jesus, it was so hard. And so, yeah. Anyway, what else? Okay, so some more time passed where, I was just trying to get to 8, 9, 10 centimeters, like fully dilated. And they were really encouraging me to move more, to help speed things up for myself, which was, of course, like the opposite of my instincts because I was instinctively so struggling with all the pain and intensity. But the other thing that started happening, this was probably around like 32 hours. So yeah, we're like super far into my labor at this point. My body started involuntarily pushing with contractions. So I wasn't choosing to push, but I noticed that my body started bearing down and pushing with contractions. And so I told my midwife and doula about it, and at first they were like, oh my gosh, wow, maybe you're like basically at 10 centimeters and maybe your body's getting ready and trying to push. And so I was like, oh good. But my midwife checked me to kind of see if that was the case, and I was still at 7 centimeters. So she was like, okay, you're not there yet. Can you try to not push? Because it's not going to be helpful if you're pushing this early on and you're not fully dilated. And I was like, oh gosh, well, I'm not trying to push. In fact, I feel like I can't stop my body from pushing. Like it was literally like a reflex. I think they call that like the fetal ejection reflex or something. And I literally couldn't stop it. I just couldn't. And I never was able to stop it. So that was the thing that pushed me over the edge and made my labor unbearable and caused me to transfer to the hospital because, yeah, like I said, we were like 32 hours in. It had already been very long. I was very tired. I was very pushed to the brink. And then my body started trying to push the baby out when I wasn't fully dilated. And that pain became absolutely intolerable. Like, I was already in a lot of pain and I was already managing it like a trooper. But this became like genuinely excruciating. Like, the contractions went from to where I could manage the pain and just kind of grunt and over and over and over again, to where, like, when I started having these contractions and my body was pushing, I could not scream. It was like horrifyingly painful with each contraction. And so, yeah, I started to feel very anxious. I came out of that, I was saying earlier, I would kind of go into a trance between contractions. That stopped at this point because the pain was so intense. I think I was being hit with so much adrenaline that I was very alert and very panicked. And so that obviously didn't help either, but it was just so painful. The pain signals that I were getting were so painful. So, yeah, I was just very doubtful and overwhelmed, but I felt like I'd worked so hard, and I was starting to think about transferring to the hospital, but I felt like I'd worked so hard. I was like, I really want to have this baby at home if I can. I put in all these hours. So anyway, the next 3 hours, they tried their best to help me do different positions and walk around and be as active as I could to try to get me fully dilated, because they know I wanted to try to have the baby at home. And so the next 3 hours were just horrible and excruciating pain because I had those contractions and my body would push, and I was just screaming through it. And I think my husband at this point was very concerned and very scared. But nobody had been like, oh my God, we we need to go to the hospital. Like, nobody was like pressuring me at all. They were really letting me make all the decisions, unless I actually had like a serious health concern. And my midwife had been monitoring my baby this whole time, and she was showing no signs of distress. So that was the other thing. And she, in fact, never showed any signs of distress the whole labor. So that was a relief. I never had to worry about her health or safety. But yeah, I started, as these next few hours were going by, when I was in horrendous pain, I started telling my husband that I just didn't think I could do it, that I didn't believe I could do it. And I think he started being like, yeah, you don't have to. And he was just very concerned and also exhausted. So yeah, I decided that I would choose to transfer to the hospital if, when my midwife checked me the next time, I had not made any meaningful progression. So she did go ahead and check me. This time it was like around 36 hours into the labor. I was the same. I was still 7 centimeters dilated, maybe less. I feel like she might have said it was even less. And so I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, I can't deal with this anymore. Like, there's no way. So I was ready at that point. I was completely ready at that point to transfer to the hospital because it was intolerable. So anyway, we all got in the car. My midwife called the hospital, let them know we were coming and to expect me, and that I was coming in. I wanted an epidural, and she just told them all the details, like, I'm 7 centimeters dilated, baby's safe, da da da. So that was really great. The car ride, like I said, was just like 7 or 8 minutes, but oh my God, it was so horrible. It was like I felt like every twist and turn, and I feel like it made my contractions happen more frequently. So it was just a really nightmarish, hellish car ride. And yeah, we got to the hospital, and everything happened like so smoothly and wonderfully. They weren't at all short-staffed or anything, not that I could tell. Yeah, so we get there, get into the room. Immediately when I get into the room, I threw up everywhere. That was the last time I threw up because I think either they gave me some sort of nausea med, or I just stopped throwing up because I got the epidural, and so the source of the pain went away and I stopped throwing up. But anyway, from the time we had got into the car, it took probably about only 50 minutes between the car ride and being able to get an epidural. So I'm really glad I made the choice because, yeah, it was only like 50 minutes, and then I was able to have pain relief, which I was so incredibly grateful for. Anyway, so yeah, we get there pretty soon after I threw up. The anesthesiologist arrives. She was really nice. She told me how to sit and try to sit still, which is really hard when you're having an excruciating contraction. But anyway, she put the epidural in. It went in perfectly the first time, and it was a really good epidural. I think I've listened to a lot of other birth stories, and there's a lot of ways epidurals can kind of go wrong. But I think it was a really good epidural placement because it seemed like I felt it pretty equally on both sides, and my legs were not like totally numb. Like I could feel my legs and I could even lift them up. They weren't like completely numbed out. I could move them, but it was just tingly and fairly numb. And so that was perfect because I've heard some women talk about how like the legs are so heavy and they can't move them at all. And I don't know, it just didn't seem necessary because immediately, after, a few minutes after the epidural was placed, I did start getting the pain relief and I could still feel the contractions, but it was like so manageable. It was like, in a normal day, what I was feeling with the epidural, I would have been like, I'm in pain. But after everything that I went through, it was like, oh, this is literally nothing. I'm just having period cramps all day. Like, that's completely fine. So I was so grateful to have that epidural. And oh my God, I so get why they exist. And I'm just glad that people have the option for pain management that they did not have hundreds of years ago, because oh my God, I don't know how I probably would have made it through somehow without that, but I can't imagine. So anyway, after I had the epidural and I felt the relief of the pain relief, I immediately started crying, just like tears of relief, because I had just been holding so much in for like literally 37 hours at that point, like a day and a half. And I was just trying to hold it all together and keep it all together. And finally, I felt like I could, let it out and like not, I didn't have to brace myself. I was literally bracing myself for a day and a half, and I finally felt like I didn't have to. So that was really good. I think it allowed my body to not only like rest, but also kind of do some emotional releasing of like what felt really traumatic to me up till that point. So yeah, I made a note here that I don't know. Oh, I was like, what does that mean? I had some, they didn't want me to have any food because, I don't know, just hospital policy, but I did have some Jello and liquids, so I had some like liquid calories. Honestly, I wasn't hungry the whole time though, because I had much bigger problems, you know what I mean? I would have thought that I'd be hungry after 53 hours of labor at the end, but I just wasn't, because my body was not prioritizing food because it was so stressed. Anyway, my husband was able to sleep some. I really couldn't sleep much at all, maybe like an hour or two after getting the epidural, but that's what they wanted me to do. They wanted me to just sleep and rest because my body was exhausted and I still had to push the baby out. But I probably slept like an hour or two, if that. There's just so much going on that I was processing. So the plan to get me to fully dilated was that they were going to break my membranes. I guess that's like breaking your water. I don't even know, but they did that. And then for the next like 12 hours, I had an amazing nurse. Like, oh my God, I just want to say, like, all of the people at the hospital, and also my midwife and doula who came to the hospital and were there at other points too, but just like everybody, literally everybody who was taking care of me during my birth was truly amazing. Like, I'm so lucky for that, because I've heard a lot of women's traumatic birth stories, and what can often cause some of the worst trauma is when you have a provider, a nurse, a doctor who is like really unempathetic and even does not obey your wishes and listen to you and things like that. And so I did not have any of that experience. So I was just so grateful, and that's part of why I hesitated to use the word traumatic in the title of this video, because like everybody treated me so well, and like if I had had even just like one nurse or doctor at the hospital or something who did not, like, that would have made this so much worse. So I was just really grateful for that. So yeah, I experienced like multiple different nurses because I was at the hospital for another like, I don't know, 18 hours or something. But the first nurse showed me different positions. After they broke my water, she showed me different positions to be in to kind of help the contractions keep going and get me fully dilated. And it worked. After, it was like another like 12 hours or something, I was finally fully dilated. I don't know why it took so long for my body, but it did. So basically it took literally almost like 50 hours for me to get to 10 centimeters dilated. I don't know, but that's what my body did. And it was great because I was fully dilated. Felt the contractions, but they were not painful, or not compared to what I had just experienced. They were like totally manageable. I could talk through them. I could laugh. I could joke with people as much as possible. So yeah, I basically got to fully dilated. The nurse said I had like a cervical lip, so she said if I wanted, she could go in there with her hand and manually try to kind of move it. And so I said that's fine. So she did that, and she was able to move it out of the way. So they were like, okay, well, you're basically ready to push. So I was like, okay, wow, like, that's great. And I remember asking this nurse, like, how long does the pushing tend to take on average? And she said, I've seen it for some women take 10 minutes and for others take 4 hours. And I was like, okay. And I was kind of thinking like, well, hopefully I'll be like 2 hours, maybe 3. But the pushing for me wound up taking just about 4 hours. So I was like, great. I am at the long end of the spectrum again. Like, why is everything just taking the longest for me? I don't understand. So anyway, they like kind of showed me how to push, and I did my first push, and I realized like, gosh, this is going to take a lot of energy, because I just exerted myself for one push, and I might have to do this for a couple hours. So I was like, okay, shoot, So I kind of prepped myself mentally that it was going to take a long time, but I was like, well, at least I'm not in pain. I did start to feel pressure. It wasn't like painful, but I did start to feel pressure, just because the baby is descending into the canal and I'm starting to push her. But honestly, also pretty soon, maybe like 30 minutes in, I noticed that the epidural started to wear off. And I did start to feel like, I don't know if pain is the right word. I guess it was painful, but it was more like I started to feel like intensity and overwhelm. And after an hour, like I said, I pushed 4 hours, but after an hour of pushing, I started to feel like very overwhelmed again, which was pretty discouraging because I felt like I had gone through all of this intensity, and then I got to the hospital and I was able to finally relax and feel safe. And then I started descending back into what felt like another personal hell. After, an hour pushing, I was like, oh my God, like I don't feel the epidural. They told me, they give you the little button you can push to increase the epidural, or I guess I could have called in the anesthesiologist again and asked him to like either do it again or like really bump up the pain meds on the epidural. But I decided not to, because like without telling anybody, I decided not to because I was scared that if I was not feeling things the way I was starting to feel them again, that I wouldn't be able to push her out. Because when I did the first few pushes with the epidural pain meds still working, I kind of just felt like it was like a shot in the dark. I was like, oh, push, but like I don't know what this is doing. And by the time I got to like half an hour and definitely an hour of pushing, my body started ramping up and doing that like pushing reflex, to where I was pushing, but like my body was also pushing. So I knew exactly when to push with my body, and I kind of felt like I needed my body to do that. And so if I had had more pain meds on board, I was worried. I was literally worried I wouldn't be able to push her out. And I really did not want to have a C-section after all of this. I didn't want a C-section no matter what, because that's major surgery, and I just did not want that. But I especially did not want a C-section after going through all of this. So I was very aware after an hour that the epidural had basically worn off, and I didn't want to do anything about that because I was scared I wouldn't be able to push her out. So I just really started to feel everything became super intense. I think the amount of adrenaline, there must have been a crazy amount of adrenaline like going through my body. I think honestly that's what was required to get the baby out. For whatever reason, it was not a smooth ride for me. And so I think my body was just like giving me the strength through giving me crazy amounts of stress hormones. And yeah, I just felt extremely overwhelmed, painful, I guess, but more so just like completely overwhelming pressure and just agitated and adrenalized. Yeah, and I had those involuntary pushing urges with every contraction. I was also pushing as much as I could intentionally on top of the reflexes. And yeah, it was just a long time. And there was like I swear the nurses like switched shifts. There was like different nurses at a certain point. They were all so wonderful. Like there was this one nurse in particular, she was so supportive, because after like 2 hours, I was like really expressing that I felt hopeless. I was like, I don't believe I can do this. I was probably like crying and freaking out. I was like, I don't think I can do this. Like, I didn't believe that the pushing was like getting me anywhere. But after about 3 hours, everybody was like, oh, we're starting to see her head come out. We can see a little hair. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, I can't believe that. But everybody was like really encouraging. They were like, you're doing it, you're doing it. And I was like, I don't feel like I can do this. And I actually remember telling that nurse at one point, like, I don't know exactly how I said it, but I kind of like hinted in some way that I couldn't do it and I needed help, because I didn't want to ask for it outright, but I was so desperate that I was like hoping somebody would be like, well, let's do like a vacuum assisted birth or what, because I was like, I can't do this by myself. That's how I felt. And so I was hoping that someone would be like, you want the vacuum to help pull her out or something? So I kind of told her, I was like, I think I need help. And it was very sweet, but she just looked at me and kind of was like, help? No, you got this. And it was like a mixture of very validating and invalidating at the same time, because I was like, I was just like, I can't do this. But also part of me was like, she said the right thing. Like, there's no reason yet that we need to go to that measure, you know? But it was, yeah, it was just really intense. Like I said, epidural was completely worn off. I was feeling everything. I was feeling everything so much that by the third hour, I could feel all of my daughter's facial features. Like, I could feel, you know, as I would push and she would kind of move down and then move back up, I could feel like, oh, that's like a little nose and ears. And it was like, I was like hyper. All of the adrenaline made me like hypersensitive. I was just like hyper agitated, hypersensitive. If I felt like a little hair on my face or something, I like had to brush it out of the way, and I was so thirsty. Like literally between every push, I would just be like, water. Like I was like completely past my limit, and I just felt like an animal. And I felt these flickers of like, I don't know, like primal rage almost, and it wasn't directed at anybody. It was just, there was so much adrenaline coursing through my body that I was aware that if I was mad at somebody, I could have lost control and like literally like lunged at them or yelled or something. Like I probably wouldn't, because I'm a relatively aware and controlled person. But I was like, yeah, I think this does happen sometimes in birth. I think women sometimes do, you know, act things out like that because it's so freaking intense. It can be so freaking intense. So what else? Yeah, and the pushing was just so intense. Like I at one point was like holding on to like the back of the hospital bed, and every time, I wasn't doing it on purpose, but I just was like, it was like I was doing like the most insane workout of my life. So like all of my arms and my back were getting this insane workout for hours. And I didn't really feel it in the moment because I was so adrenalized and I just needed to make it through. But oh my God, I felt it the days after. So the doctor came in. The doctor was nice. She was the only person, though, that I wasn't like, oh, I feel so safe with her or whatever. But it didn't matter because everybody else was really wonderful. So she was okay. She was kind of just neutral. She came in once the baby's head was fairly close to being out. She was there, ready to catch the baby, essentially. And yeah, I just kept pushing, and oh man, it was so intense. But I had this point where we were I was getting pretty close to having my daughter out, and the pushing was so intense, and I was working so hard because I was like, I just need this to be over. I need this to be over. And I had this moment where literally for like a split second, I feel like I literally left my body and had, I don't know what to call it, like a otherworldly, like metaphysical, spiritual experience for a split second where I feel like I left my body and I like, I don't even know. It's like I saw myself in third person. I was like looking down on myself or something. And I just had this overwhelming feeling of like deja vu where I was like, I just felt like I have done this many times before. That's the only way I can describe it. It's where I left my body for a split second and was reminded of having done this many times before. And I didn't know fully what to make of it, but I personally believe that I believe, you know, that I have a soul. I believe that humans have souls, and I believe that my soul has lived other lives and maybe will live other lives. That's kind of the best that I can make of my understanding of reality at this point. And who knows, but that's just what I choose to believe. And so in that moment, that's what it felt like. Is like, wow, I have already been a woman in other lives that has given birth many times. And it was crazy. It just made me feel, I guess, a little bit empathized or seen in a way, but also just like, holy shit, the amount of women that have had to go through such intense experiences like this. It was just like, oh my God, this is so much. So anyway, finally, yeah, got to what was the last push. And for the last few pushes, I pushed so hard, but it was the last push especially that I just pushed with literally everything that I had in me. It was like I was finding strength from I don't know where, but I just needed her to be out. I was so overwhelmed, so exhausted and overwhelmed. So she just shot out her head came out, and the rest of her body just shot out like a rocket, probably because I was pushing so hard. And my husband said, I didn't see it, but he said that like a whole bunch of like fluids of like, he was like, there was like red, orange, clear. He was like, there was all these crazy fluids that came out after her. Like he said, he was shocked, but you know, like you do gain all this weight in pregnancy, and a lot of it is like water weight and fluids and stuff. So yeah, she came out, and I was just absolutely like, I was just in immediate relief. Like I was like, oh, thank God, you know, it's over. So relieved. Immediately they brought her up to my chest, put her on my chest, and she was there, and I did not feel any immediate sense of like love or bonding. I just honestly I had just been through my own personal hell for over 2 days, and so I just honestly wasn't really thinking about her yet. I think if she had at any point she had distress symptoms, I would have been thinking about her a lot more, but she had never shown any fetal distress symptoms, so I just I wasn't concerned about her wellness, luckily. And so yeah, I just unfortunately did not feel that overwhelming sense of connection and love that a lot of women do feel when your baby comes out. But it didn't concern me because it just made sense. Like, if you've listened to my story and you empathize with what I'm saying, like, I was not going to be hard on myself or like concerned about the fact that I wasn't like, oh, my baby. Like, I had literally felt like I had been through hell. And so I was more so just had her on my chest, and I was patting her, but I was more so just like, oh my God, I'm so glad that is over. So I was just sitting in relief. And luckily later, the days after, I definitely bonded with her and felt, you know, all of those things. And I wasn't concerned that I wouldn't. I just took note of the fact that, like, oh yeah, I'm not feeling overwhelmed with joy, but it's like, why would I in that moment, you know, after everything that I had just felt. So anyway, she was on my chest for just like a minute or so, and then pretty quickly the vibe of the room shifted and it was back focusing on me. The doctor was pretty intent on birthing the placenta as fast as possible. I think she was concerned that I was like, yeah, hemorrhaging or something. So she was pushing on my stomach, trying to birth the placenta. It was very uncomfortable. And I was like, oh, God, you know, I was like, can I just have some reprieve? But like, no, she needed to get the placenta out. So she's pushing on my belly, all this. Finally, it comes out. She told me that I had torn twice. I had a first degree, so a minor tear near my urethra, and then I had a second degree, so more like moderate tear on my perineum. So she was stitching me up. She used a local anesthetic, but honestly, I feel like I felt the stitches, so it was just painful, and I was just like, you know, I was kind of crying. I was like, I just want this to be over. I just want to be with my baby and not be poked and prodded and not be feeling pain. But anyway, after she stitched me up, she was like, you know, you're losing a lot of blood. So they called in a separate doctor. She arrived with all of these like metal scissors and tools, scraping tools and utensils and all this stuff, which I did not want to see. But she brought all this in because she said she needed to go internal and do, I think, what they call like a uterine evacuation, which is where they scrape out any of the placenta that has not, that is still in there. Otherwise you're going to continue hemorrhaging. So she kind of made it seem like, okay, we're going to have to just go in. And I told, like, thank God I told her, I was like, I can feel everything. Like, I know I have an epidural in me right now, but it's not working at all. And they were like, oh yeah, you can move your legs. I was like, I can do more than move my legs. Like, I can feel a tiny drop of air on my legs. Like, I can feel everything. And so I was like, you need to give me something. I cannot be awake for you reaching in and scraping around in there with those scissors and metal tools. Like, it's like, I'm laughing about it right now, but it was terrifying to think about that after everything that I just went through. And also, my mom had me at a birth center, so she did a fully unmedicated vaginal birth, and after she had me, she hemorrhaged, and they didn't have any pain meds. And so she said that the midwife went in with her hand and squeezed and pulled out the blood clots and all of that manually, and she said it was way more painful than the birth itself. So I had that in my mind, and I was like, there's no way I can do that right now. Like, I was like, you need to knock me out. And so luckily, like, pretty immediately, a different anesthesiologist comes in the room, and he was very sweet, and he kind of was like, oh, should we try to do something with your epidural? I think he maybe tried to give me some to bump up the epidural, but I was like, no, I can still move my legs. Like, I can do anything. I can run around the room. So I think they just ditched the epidural idea because that would have taken too long or whatever. He gave me propofol, which I didn't know what that was, but it was like a fast acting, it just knocks you out. It knocks you out, but it only knocked me out for 20 minutes. So I completely lost consciousness. Thank God. I lost consciousness. I didn't even know. They didn't even tell me, like, you're gonna pass out. I just passed out without realizing it. I was out for like 20 minutes, and by the time I woke up, the woman had done everything she needed to do, gotten all of the rest of the placenta out, and I woke up, and I remember being like kind of chill and calm, but being like, yeah, are you guys gonna, like, how far are you from doing the procedure or something? And my midwife, who had been there the whole time, was like, they already did it. And I was just like, I was literally so relieved, because I was like, I just could not have gone through that after. I mean, I know I could have, but it just would have been so much worse to have gone through that after everything that I'd gone through. So yeah, I was so grateful to have been out for that, not had to see it, hear it, just to be completely out. That's what I needed, just no consciousness. But anyway, I had lost a lot of blood. They told me I lost 2 liters of blood, which apparently for like a typical vaginal delivery, it's normal to lose like half a liter of blood, and apparently for like a typical C-section, it's normal to lose like a liter of blood. So I lost 2 liters of blood, which is quite a lot, but like not quite enough where they were gonna do like a blood transfusion. But they did give me an iron infusion, because otherwise I would have been extremely low on iron, and like oral supplementation would have taken a really long time to get me back to where I needed to be. So they gave me an iron infusion at the hospital, and yeah, at some point they gave me Kalia back, and they gave me my daughter back. I try not to say her name. They gave me my daughter back, and I was able to actually like just be with her undisturbed, because I felt like I had just been like poked and prodded, and I just was just going through hell this whole time. It felt like. So I finally had her back, and I tried to like nurse her, and we just tried to like sleep, but I honestly could not sleep. I just did not sleep for like 3 days basically. And then we went home with our infant baby, so we did not sleep much either. But yeah, that night when I like tried to sleep, or I guess it was like day maybe, tried to sleep, in the, hospital, I just remember like it literally felt like my body was like processing the trauma that had happened. I kept like waking up. It was as though like my body was like replaying like what felt like movements, almost like scary movements things that it was like trying to integrate. I feel like I'm not saying this right, but certain like movements or contractions or whatever that kept replaying over and over while I was trying to sleep and kept waking me up. It felt like it was trying to like integrate what had happened. So I think that was good, but it was just kind of intense to feel when I was like trying to sleep with my baby. So anyway, we were at the hospital for 28 hours and then we went home. I was really happy with the hospital care and everything, but I also just wanted to get home. I wanted to get home, close that crazy chapter, and just be with my baby. So we got home. I was so sore, like just so sore. My whole body felt like it had been hit by a truck. The combination of the contractions for, whatever 48 hours and then the pushing is probably what was the worst. The pushing for 4 hours, my arms and my whole core and back were just so sore. So I remember trying to even just hold my daughter. She wasn't even 7 pounds, but it felt like so hard, and like nursing her was so painful the first few days just because I was absolutely so sore. I think I was just really tired too because, it had just been so intense, and then also I'd lost a lot of blood. So I was just really tired, so it made it kind of hard the first few days. I hope for my next baby that it's not so intense so that I can like enjoy holding them, enjoy nursing them the first few days, and not just be like in intolerable back pain. Unfortunately, so yeah, we had family arrive after that, and everybody got to meet Kalia. Sorry, everybody got to meet my daughter, who I'm trying to not say her name. And yeah, we had to go back to the hospital because I had developed a fever. It wasn't crazy, but it was like 101.8 or something. So I had to go back to the hospital and get some antibiotics. I think it was either related to like the uterine evacuation because of the hemorrhage, or maybe mastitis. I don't know, but that was a bummer to like have to go back to the hospital and to like be sick again. But anyway, that was fine. We managed it okay, and the fever did go away after I went on the antibiotics. So yeah, that is essentially the birth story. Things went really well after that. And yeah, like I guess I want to highlight that even though, like I said, this birth was very difficult, very, very difficult for me and felt traumatic for me, but I never felt alone in the process. I never felt unsupported. And I also avoided a C-section, those were kind of my two main goals, is to like hopefully not have to have a C-section and to never feel like unsupported by anyone I was with. And so I definitely, those things happened for me, and I was really grateful for that. And I'm a very spiritual person, and I pray all the time, and there was luckily also no part of me that felt like angry at like the world, a higher power, God, that sort of thing. Like, I don't know, I felt like I just understood that it was, for whatever reason, it was just something that was on my path to go through, and I didn't feel like confused or like, why me, really. I think the whole process had like immediately already made me like a more empathetic person, and I just realized like, yeah, like a lot of women go through things like this with birth where they just don't expect it and it happens. I remember I saw my midwife like, I don't know, like 5 days after the birth or something, and I remember just asking her when she was leaving, like, what happened? Like, why did that go the way it went? Like, why was my labor so long? Why did my body, I was just like, what, literally, like, what happened? What went wrong? And she was so sweet. She was just like, I think she, like, honestly, like, just gave me a hug and kissed my head or something and was like, it's just, she was like, it's just, you just don't have control over everything. And some people just have, like, they get dealt a crappy hand. And so whether that's totally true or not, I think there's some truth in it. I don't know why it happened the way it did for me, but it did. And yeah, I wrote down a couple other things. I said that that whole process, along with parenthood, of course, too, has just definitely caused me to grow a lot. Like, I wouldn't wish a really difficult birth experience on anybody, but it definitely caused me to grow a lot. In a way, it kind of ramped me up because it was so intense and adrenalizing. So I feel like for a few months I was kind of a little on edge and ramped up. But in another way too, I feel like it calmed me down because it just was like, it just reset something where I feel like I experienced so much intensity that I feel like it made the rest of my life after that be like, well, this is pretty manageable because I'm not in excruciating pain. So it kind of like put things in perspective. And I think it just, I feel like it definitely just made me a more empathetic person in general. Like, not just thinking about birth, but honestly just thinking about anything. And yeah, just realizing that, like, just thinking too about, like, for women throughout history who have, birthed for millennia, and especially before birth control, lots of women had many, many births, and there wasn't modern medicine, so there wasn't pain management, and there wasn't some of the life-saving measures for baby and mom that there are now. And gosh, it just made me think, like, wow, like, what women have had to go through. Like, it's, and people probably, so much of history, like, they didn't talk about trauma or whatever. So, maybe a woman had like a horrific birth that she barely survived, or maybe her baby died or whatever, and it's just like, you just keep on going, and maybe nobody literally asks you about it, and it just literally makes you go insane because it is so hard. Like, this is probably where, like, terms like hysteria come from, because women have to go through things like this, and sometimes it is absolutely horrendous, and then you're just supposed to go on with your life even though you have, like, this insane trauma that you're carrying. So it just made me think about that, and makes me, like, a little bit angry thinking about, this feels like unfair, but that's just life, right? And yeah, I also thought a lot about, like, well, gosh, what would this have been like for me if this had happened 200 years ago, before some of the life-saving measures that we have now? I was like, would my hemorrhage have caused me to die? I don't know. Honestly, like, it could have, in the right circumstance, my hemorrhage could have caused me to die. And then I think about, like, what if I hadn't had the ability to get an epidural? I would have been in excruciating pain. My body would have kept trying to push the baby even though I wasn't fully dilated. How would that have ended? Like, it's not great to try to push a baby out when you're not ready. What would that have done? Like, I literally don't know, but it just made me recognize, like, it just made me really grateful, because I was like, wow, if this had not happened the way it did in today's day and age, maybe it would have worked out. Maybe I would have lived and blah, blah, blah. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I would have died or went through so much more trauma that I wouldn't be able to handle it, like, literally. So the whole experience just made me realize that, we don't, which I already knew this logically, but it really viscerally made me realize, like, we don't have control over everything, and I am somebody who likes to take control of what I can. And I will definitely do that with my next birth, where I will try to plan out and prepare myself as much as possible. I think we should do that. It's not like I'm saying, oh yeah, you don't have control over anything in your life, just let it happen. I'm not saying that at all, but I think you have control over a lot, but then especially in things like birth, there's a lot that you don't have control over. And just to like recognize that and give yourself grace, and not have judgment for yourself or other people, because I think that could be, maybe a way of masking fear. Like, nobody wants to think like, oh, I could do everything right, take great care of myself, go to all the birthing classes, blah blah blah, and could still have a horrendous unexpected labor, wind up needing a C-section, all this stuff. Nobody wants to think that. So I think it's easier for some people to like sit in the sense of like safety, like I've controlled every variable. And maybe the people who wind up having those experiences, they didn't do enough planning and they didn't try hard enough, and it's like, that's not true, you know. So yeah, I think that was just like a really helpful reminder, for me. Yeah, so definitely thinking about all this for our next baby. For the next baby, I am just gonna plan a hospital birth. I thought about maybe a birth center, maybe even a home birth, but I just was like, I just don't. With what I went through, I was like, I just want the security of being at the hospital. If I want an epidural, I'll just get it. And I'm not certain that I will. Like, it just depends on how much pain I'm feeling. It's possible that this next birth will not be so painful and overwhelming. If that's the case, I don't know that I'll need an epidural. If it's anything like it was last time, I'll definitely get an epidural. I'm just gonna play it by ear. I'm not stressing about that aspect. Like, I'll just do what makes sense in the moment. So yeah, that's my plan. I genuinely do think my next birth will be a better experience, just because I'm like, I freaking hope so. It seems like it should be. But I know maybe it'll be just that hard, or maybe it'll be harder. Like, I know anything is possible. I think I'm assuming that it'll work out better in whatever way, easier in whatever way, but I realize I don't know how it's going to unfold. I think I just have a realistic mindset where I'm like, I feel optimistic, but I know anything could happen, so I'm aware of that. And yeah, I think that's everything that I wanted to say. So yeah, appreciate you if you've watched. If you want to share anything about your experience, with your labor and delivery, feel free. Oh, one other thing that I forgot to say is that I have really great friends and family in my life for the most part, but even so, very few people genuinely made space and asked me what had happened and wanted to hear the whole story. And I wouldn't have taken this long to tell them, but I feel like even 10 minutes to talk about what had happened would have been really nice. And even like my mom didn't really ask for any details, and that's just my mom. She's just that way. But it sucks to go through something so difficult and then to feel like everybody's like, oh, well, it's great that you're okay and the baby's healthy. And you're just like, it's not great. Like, I'm not okay. I'm not okay. I just went through one of the hardest things in my life, if not the hardest thing I've ever been through. And I would really like it if you can talk with me about that or support me in some way. So that is an aspect of childbirth for women that sucks. And I think it's like that for most women. I think it's getting better, but I think for most of history, women just did not really get to talk about their experiences. And of course, some women have really largely positive birth experiences, but even so, like, they would probably like to be able to talk more about their story and process it more. So I just say that to say, like, if you're wondering how you can be supportive to a mom who is like, either had a baby already or going to have a baby, just like make space for her to talk. And especially if she had a really difficult or traumatic labor, like, ask her, say like as much as she is wanting and feeling comfortable to share with you, that you want to hear it and you want to be there to talk with her and support her. Because, gosh, if I had had more people who had said that to me, like, that's just exactly what I needed. And maybe some women don't always want to open up about those things. Everybody's different, but you can always ask. And I think for a lot of women, even if they don't think it's what they want, it's what they need. Like, nobody is supposed to go through really hard things and just keep it all to themselves. Like, no, we're not doing that anymore. So anyway, that is the birth story of my first daughter. I'm pretty sure I will tell you all about the story of our second baby, which we don't know the gender of and probably won't know the gender of. So I'm pretty sure I'll tell that story on here too. But yeah, thank you all for listening. If anybody listened all the way to the end, I know it was a very long story, but I just wanted to put it all out there for myself as much as anybody else. Okay, everybody, take care. I will catch you soon. Bye.